Talk, shop, pop, movies.
Ahoy there, this is Derek, the Convicted Cinephile, and if you're a convicted cinephile yourself, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel down below. On my channel, I like to talk, shop, and pop open, that is, movies and physical media. And today I will be joining the Rad Pack in their challenge for the Rad 9 movies that made us. Yes, so I have actually, I think I have 10 movies here and another one in my brain that I wanted to include as honorable mentions. Not all 10 of them, just 2, and then the 9 are the real list. So without further ado, let's start with those. So my honorable mentions, the first one is only an honorable mention because I don't own it at the moment, and it's getting a nice new fancy 4K box set just in time for my anniversary. So, honey, if you're watching, that's what I want. That'll be the Toxic Avenger, the trilogy, essentially. I used to watch constantly, had them taped off TV all the time. This is back when I was like 5 years old. It wasn't the unrated, uncut, watermelon head crushing scene version of the movie. It was the USA Up All Night Late Night cable version of the movie, but it was still pretty bad for a 5-year-old to be watching. But back in those days, we didn't have a lot of superhero content, and I'm a big superhero guy, as you probably all know who are watching. It was just nice to have something like that, and I love it. And Toxic Avenger has been one of my favorites of all time. The first one primarily, but I've always loved the other two, and then the fourth one later came out when I was a teenager. But my first honorable mention, like I said, would be in this list, if I owned it, the Toxic Avenger. Okay, so the rest of them I do have. The second honorable mention, it's a movie that my sister and I rented constantly as children. That'll be a handful of these things. And that'll be Milo and Otis. Yes, adorable movie. Narrated by, what's his name, Dudley Moore, right? About a cute little pug. I've always wanted a pug since this movie, and little kitty. Cute movie. It's a nice short, 75-minute long movie. The sad thing about watching it now is that they went through several Milos and Otises making this movie because the animal safety thing was not as big back then, and in the country that made this, the Fuji Television Network. So there you go, if that helps narrow it down. Cute movie, very sad when you watch it and realize, wow, most of these cats just died. Hence the honorable mention-ness. Okay, so I just realized I forgot to grab one. So I technically have 3 honorable mentions. So this one will now get shoehorned into being an honorable mention. But it's one I watched constantly as a kid. But I was probably a couple years older than the rest of these, so I figured that's why it should be the honorable mention. And that is the original Revenge of the Nerds. Yes, my favorite boner comedy. Pretty much the only one I truly, truly love. Revenge of the Nerds 2 is fine. 3 and 4, I don't even remember if I've watched, but I found this at a thrift store. So I went, hell yeah, this thing's not the easiest thing to find. I'll grab the Atomic Wedgie collection. But the original Revenge of the Nerds, it's up there with my favorite 80s comedies, period. And I used to watch it all the time. Very relatable when you're a nerd like I am. Now we'll get into the actual 9. Oh boy, I suck. All right, like I was saying, this is a good mix of genres, movies I owned, movies I watched at grandma's house, so on and so forth. I forgot another one. I just realized that. I'll be right back. Okay, now that I remembered the other one I was gonna grab, I have so many. I thought I like set a whole bunch aside to be like, yeah, these would be good, and then I like forgot the first half I did, and now I just got too many damn movies. So this final honorable mention will be solely because I mentioned it recently on a different stream. It's a movie I never owned until I was like a teenager on my own VHS until my mom's dog literally ate it. That'll be The Brave Little Toaster. The one animated Disney movie as a kid I wanted to watch constantly at my grandparents' house. Nobody else wanted to watch this except for me. And this is like the only one I ever wanted to watch, besides maybe like Aladdin on occasion. It's essentially Toy Story with appliances. So where are we? Okay, now that I have my 4 honorable mentions out of the way, here are my actual Rad 9. So these aren't in any particular order. I may have already said that and forgot, but here they be. This one is the one I just remembered I was gonna grab. It was literally the first one I grabbed out there and forgot to bring it in here. That's how bad my short-term memory is. So it's one that I think a lot of people would pick. Dusty. Woo, it's dusty. It's a movie I never owned once again until I bought it myself on DVD. But every Christmas Eve, I would go to my cousin's house and we would watch this every year on Christmas Eve while eating dinner, and our parents slash the adults at the time would be, you know, playing cribbage and smoking and doing whatever adults did back in the late 80s and early 90s. And that would be The Goonies. Yes, I was a Goonies kid. Still am. I love it. Steven Spielberg came in, he touched this movie, turned it to gold. That's what he does. This is the big old Blu-ray collection, by the way. But yeah, The Goonies, one I watched at least once a year, but every year on tape at my cousin's house on Christmas Eve. So, hashtag memories. This is one that I had taped off of cable because, yes, I was one of those fancy boys who had cable, I guess. I don't know. Back when cable was worth having and they didn't have commercials as much and, you know, stuff was good. And you would tape movies off cable and then you'd remember the commercials during the taped off TV cable thing. You know, was I the only one who did that? Like, I would always watch the commercials, and like that was some of my favorite parts of the movies I had taped off TV were the commercials at the time. I'm weird. One of my all-time favorite Tim Burton movies, and no, it's not Batman, it's the other one, Beetlejuice. I would watch Beetlejuice constantly, at least it seemed like it. As a kid, I'd always watch the cartoon. I had some action figures. I wish I still did just to show them off because they're fun. But Beetlejuice is one that I and now my son both love. So it's always good when you can force your 2-year-old son to get into Beetlejuice and he likes it. He's now 5. Beetlejuice, good gateway horror. The next one is another one I never owned until I bought it on DVD as a teenager back when I started collecting DVDs, blah blah blah. One my sister and I would rent from Mr. Movies all the time, and we'd always watch it when it showed up on television. And it was shot where I live in I almost said Minneapolis. That's probably accurate, but I don't live in Minneapolis, technically. Minnesota is what I meant to say. Same different. Drop Dead Fred. This is the Vinegar Syndrome one. I'm sure everyone watching this already has it or knows what it is. But yeah, love the sidewalk shot drawing. I still quote this movie to this day. And the good thing about this movie, watching it again recently once I bought this Blu-ray, is that as a kid you love Fred and, you know, being a kid and all the goofy kid shit. And as an adult, it's like, wow, I really relate to Phoebe Cates' character in this movie. So it works on both levels as long as you can get into it that way. All alongside, all up there, yucky yucky smelly dog poo on the stairs. I'm going to start singing a lot, I think, during this, so I apologize in advance. The next one I have is another one just like Drop Dead Fred that my sister and I used to rent constantly, and I never owned until I owned this Blu-ray. I was going to pick E.T., but that's lame. Everyone likes E.T. Everyone owned E.T. on VHS and a clamshell as a kid. But I always wanted to watch Mac and Me. Yeah, we'd rent Mac and Me constantly. And FYI, this is a glorious episode of the Netflix Mystery Science Theater series. I think it's the first episode of the second season they did on Netflix. Go watch, if you like Mac and Me at all, or don't, go watch the Netflix episode for Mac and Me on Mystery Science Theater. McDonald's breakdance song sequence for no reason, sponsored by Coca-Cola. The companies that didn't get into E.T. and regretted it, they were in this film, and they regretted it once again. Paul Rudd's finest film right here. This is the last of the chunk of ones I used to rent as a kid, I think, with my sister. It is, again, one of my kids' favorites that he likes. Well, it's not one of his favorites, that's exaggerating. But I finally got my kid to watch it last year, and he loved it. Parenting goals right there. And that is a horror movie. It's rated R, so, you know, I'm a cool dad. I show my 5-year-old rated R movies because I've seen them 1,000 times, and I was his age when I watched it. Night of the Creeps. Yeah. Once again, one I never really owned until the Blu-ray. And not even this Blu-ray. I had the crappy one before this, so when they announced this one, I had to splurge and get it. I love it. But yeah, movie I can rewatch. Either the director's cut or not. They're like literally a minute longer than the other. I don't even remember the difference. There's like one shot at the end of a spaceship or something. But you get the weird little like dwarf-like aliens in the opening, crash landing on Earth in the 50s and shooting their weird slug poop creatures into kids from the 50s after their sock hops when they're at the Lover's Lane, and the serial killer that's around back then for some reason is there, and the guy gets frozen, and then in the 80s he gets unfrozen, and the cop who was solving the murder case is part of it, and that's, the great, why can't I think of his name, of course, now that I'm looking right at this, Tom Atkins, there we go. I'm sorry, Tom, I love you. Tom Atkins trying to solve the murder case from 30 years ago that ended up being a weird slug invasion body snatching style zombie movie, and it's a hoot and a half, as I always say. Night of the Creeps. If it's one you haven't seen, just go buy it. It's that good. Don't watch it. Just go buy Night of the Creeps, because it's fucking awesome. And show it to your kids. All right, I was torn between two other movies for this one. Not two other movies, but two movies including this one. And they're both the same director and they're similar. So I just decided to go with this one because even though I watched them probably both about the same amount, I didn't want to give two slots to a similar movie / filmmaker. And that is Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop. I haven't even watched this yet on 4K. You really need to watch this. I love RoboCop. I had it taped off HBO alongside Total Recall is the other one I was referring to before. I used to watch Total Recall and RoboCop taped off HBO constantly as a child. Way too young to be watching these movies, even if it was the R-rated HBO versions and not the unrated versions. It's a lot for a kid to take in, but I love them. I love those movies. So, yeah. Total Recall is an honorable mention. Does that make sense? But amazing. I like I said, I like superhero movies. Superheroes before they really had many superhero movies. And like Toxic Avenger, there we go. This was like a superhero movie to me. Essentially it is. It's a man who dies, gets turned into a robot, and then fights crime. It's a superhero movie. This wasn't a comic book until after the fact. And then it was, they made action figures and all that fun stuff. But I have 3 copies of this movie, and I don't own more than 1 copy of most movies. So for me to have 3 copies of RoboCop, all on formats that I can actually view, is impressive. Here's one that I had taped off television. Well, I used to just watch it on cable all the time, and then I taped it on TV, and I was so excited for the direct-to-video sequel when that came out. But I'm talking about the original here, and that is Tremors. Yes, so I used to see the TV cable slightly edited down version as a kid, but I mean, this is a PG-13 movie anyways, if I remember right, isn't it? Not that bad. Not that bad in Tremors. Well, this is not rated, so that doesn't help me. Thanks, 4K. You're useless. There's not much in it that should make it rated R. There's no boobies and swearing, really. It's just some damn cool creature effects of giant slugs that come out of the ground when they feel you move and want to eat you with little worm tentacles. Man, it kicks ass. And you got Kevin Bacon and the late great Fred Ward in there. My mom, Reba McEntire. She's not really my mom. People just always say she looks like Reba McEntire, and my mom fucking hates Reba McEntire, so it's fun to make fun of. Tremors is great. That's another one. Just go buy Tremors if you haven't seen it. It's an early 90s monster movie that's like a 50s monster movie filmed in the 80s. Does that make sense? Second to last, I've mentioned superheroes multiple times, and this was the superhero movie I had taped off TV once again, that I would watch endlessly, more than probably any other movie in this stack. It's hard to gauge. I watched these movies so many times they could never give a number. And it is one of the OG superhero movies. Not the OG superhero movie, but its sequel. Superman 2. I was going to grab my Steelbook, but I'm like, oh yeah, I have the Betamax tape. I'll grab that. It's more fun. The Steelbook's prettier, but the Betamax is funnier. So there we go. A case that's 4 times the size of the actual tape. And look at that artwork. They put a lot of effort into that one. Superman 2 is arguably better than the first movie, and I use that term very strongly. I used to prefer it to the original until my teenage years when I got the DVD set and I rewatched the original essentially for the first time because I only watched this so much, and then I would always rent part 4, which is terrible and I love it, from the library. Every time I'd go to the library, I'd make my parents rent me Superman 4, and they'd probably hate me for it. And then Superman 3 was always my favorite to watch on cable, because I love the scene where he fights himself. So Superman 1, even though it's like the best movie out of all of them, was always the one I watched the least. But the one I have the most fond memories of is Superman 2, hashtag Kneel Before Zod. And the 9th one, which I almost didn't even think about grabbing, until I realized, hey, I have this on VHS. And I'm going to show it because I'm in that VHS battle on Bob's Blu-rays channel. That's tomorrow night. But this tape was already mentioned the first night of the thing, so I figured it's safe to show, and it's a common enough title that everyone else and their grandma probably also has it. That would be Adventures in Babysitting. I really need to get this on Blu-ray because the Disney Plus version is censored and it literally cuts out all the funniest lines in the movie, probably because they're offensive. It's a PG-13 comedy from the 80s. Something's not going to sit right with somebody. Fucking deal with it. Jesus Christ, people. One of the many VHSs I actually owned as a kid that I still have today. I love the Back to the Future style font, which is just funny because Elizabeth Shue, hot as ever, is in Back to the Futures 2 and 3. This is a Chris Columbus film who directed like Home Alone, stuff like that. So I've always liked his style, at least back in these days. What's his name? Who plays Daryl was always my favorite. Anthony Rapp, there we go. And then you got Keith Coogan. And all the characters are like likable and memorable, which is weird for a kid's movie. Like you got the cute teenage lead who's like probably 25 in real life in the movie. And you got Brad and Daryl. She's Chris. I'm trying to remember the younger sister's name, but I always loved her because she had the Thor helmet. And like I said a million times already, superhero nerd. So when you see Vincent D'Onofrio, Thor in this, it warms my cockles every time. But for anyone who hasn't seen this, essentially, I'm trying to describe it. In the movie, these kids go out into the city when they're not supposed to because her boyfriend or her friend is lost, is stuck at the bus station, so she has to drive down to get him. She has to bring the kids with, and they get into some trouble. Long story short, there's guys out to get her, and the girl's probably dead. They ain't got a nickel, and they should be in bed. And she's out of luck watching these guys. She's got the do-da-diddle-a-boo-do babysitting blues. Babysitting blues. Adventures in Babysitting. So that's them. Where are the actual 9? Here we go. Like, where's my actual pile of 9 so I can remind myself what they are? My Rad 9 movies that made me, plus an unnecessary amount of honorable mentions that I did not plan on doing. Go Derek. Once again, my name is Derek, the Convicted Cinephile. Please like, share, and subscribe, and go do this challenge. It was fun. When I was picking through my stuff, I didn't expect to remember as many of these as I did, because I was just like, oh yeah, I've got to do Goonies, and I've got to do Beetlejuice, the two I like forgot until the last second. And I was like, oh yeah, Superman 2, and it you keep racking your brain, and then you picking through your shelves, and you're like, oh, Night of the Creeps, fuck yeah, stuff like that. So go do it. You'll remember things from your childhood you might have forgot that you knew, and it's a fun challenge. So thank you to the Rad Pack, all threes of y'all, for doing this challenge. It's a fun one. It's not like difficult. It doesn't hurt your brain doing it. This one, you feel this one in your heart more than you do in your brain, and that's the way to go about it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Talk, shop, pop, movies.